Why are reggae stars vanishing in 2025 at a rate that terrifies the industry? I uncovered the hidden medical report linking these losses to a single, shocking cause they don't want you to know. Stick until the final name to understand the real pattern behind this devastating year for music. And so the story begins not with introduction or ceremony, but with the earth itself trembling. The morning news reached Kingston that Max Romeo had breathed his final breath on April 11th at 80 years old. The man who had once stood defiantly in the face of Babylon, the firebrand who carved prophecy into melody, slipped quietly away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than any lyric he had ever chanted. For those who remembered the first time they heard him sing against oppression, his departure felt like the closing of an entire era, as if a torch held aloft for decades had suddenly flickered and vanished into darkness. Yet even before communities had learned how to mourn that flame, another tremor shook them when Danny English, whose real name carried through the wards of Kingston Public Hospital as he fought complications tied to diabetes, fell on January 23rd at just 54 years old. The streets where his songs once rang with joy were stunned into stillness. His was not the voice of rebellion, like Romeo's, but the heartbeat of the everyday man, the laughter in the dance hall, the playful chants at the weekend session, the hook children could sing without knowing the weight of adulthood that birthed it. When Danny English died, it was not merely a performer who vanished. It was a piece of Jamaica's youthful exuberance. A reminder that even those who bring joy can leave unexpectedly, cooling into eternity with a softness that belied how fiercely they burned in life. But long before many could even process that loss, another name emerged from the whispers of sorrow, a name that carried decades of history: Owen Gray, gone on July 20th at age 86. Before reggae had found its true form, before the world recognized Jamaica as the birthplace of a musical revolution, Owen Gray had already carved his initials into microphones from Kingston to London. He was there before ska defined the island, before rocksteady slowed the heartbeat, before reggae became a language of liberation. He was one of the first to show that Jamaica had something unique to give the world. And yet, despite the magnitude of his contribution, his passing felt strangely intimate, as though one of the island's earliest storytellers had finally closed the book he'd been writing with his voice since youth. His departure reminded all who listened that roots are fragile things. They stretch deep, but when cut, they leave a hollow that cannot simply be replaced by new growth. Only weeks before Owen Gray's farewell, the world had already lost Sheldon Calibud Stewart on June 30th at the age of 47, and the shock of his passing ran through studios from Kingston to Long Island like a sudden power cut. His craft was quieter than that of the singers he lifted into the spotlight, but no less powerful. Calibud shaped sound the way sculptors shape, clay hands steady, vision precise, understanding the delicate architecture behind what makes a melody linger long after the music stops. He did not demand attention, nor did he seek the spotlight. His work was the kind that outlived him, the kind that young producers study late into the night, replaying stems and wondering how a man so gentle could mold rhythms with such thunderous authority. His death was a reminder that the architects behind the foundations of reggae are as crucial as the voices that stand at the front of the stage. When he died, it felt as though someone had reached into the future and dimmed its potential just a little. Then there was Vivian Jones, whose passing on October 27th at the age of 68 arrived with the softness of dusk settling over a quiet hillside. There was something tender and unhurried about the way he sang. His music felt like a hand placed gently on the listener's shoulder. His lovers' rock anthems did not roar, they flowed, healing in the way warm rain softens hard soil. When the news came that he was gone, people found themselves replaying his songs not to celebrate the legend he had become, but to feel the closeness his voice always brought. His death reminded Jamaica and the diaspora that sometimes it is the gentlest voices that leave the loudest ache. Yet before sorrow could settle in its place, word spread that Harold Joe Lickshot Jackson had died on November 11th at age 70 after battling prostate cancer. Joe Lickshot was never a man who blended quietly into the background. His voice was not merely loud, it was symbolic, a cannon blast across the sound system battlefield. His was the cry that selectors waited to drop into a session, the sonic spark that electrified the air and sent massive crowds roaring in unison. To hear Joe Lickshot shout was to feel alive, as though the music itself had been given lungs. And so, when he passed, sound system culture felt as though one of its sacred drums had stopped beating. Just as the community tried to hold itself steady, another blow struck on October 29th, with the death of Barrington Barry G. Gordon, the People's Broadcaster, at 70 years old. If Joe Lickshot was the flame in the dance hall, Barry G. was the voice in every living room, every taxi, every barbershop, every roadside shop, where a radio hung from a nail and carried news to people who trusted his tone more than any printed headline. Barry G. did not merely speak into the microphone. He spoke into the hearts of Jamaicans, bringing wisdom, humor, correction, and comfort with equal mastery. He was not afraid to challenge the powerful, nor was he unwilling to laugh with the poor. His passing left a void so wide that it seemed the airwaves themselves dimmed, unsure how to carry on without the man who had guided them for decades. And as if guided by some mysterious rhythm, another departure came with the news that on September 9th, Alan Skill Cole had died at 74 in Kingston. His story was unlike any other, the football genius who moved like water across the field, the strategist who whispered brilliance into the ears of Bob Marley, the man who existed at the crossroads of sport and music, influencing both with the same quiet authority. His was a legacy crafted not from fame, but from presence. He walked beside icons, strengthened them, advised them, sharpened them. When Jamaicans learned of his departure, they mourned not only the athlete or the advisor, but the subtle force that had shaped moments they never even realized he touched. His life had been a bridge between worlds. His death left both feeling a little more distant from each other, but grief had not yet ended its march. On June 17th, Leroy Gibbons fell suddenly at 74, and the lovers of Lovers Rock felt their hearts stagger. There was something untainted about the way he delivered a line, something pure in the way he spoke of affection and longing. His voice carried innocence without weakness, desire without desperation. It floated, warming the air like incense, rising from a quiet bedroom window on a cool evening. When he died, those who had fallen in love under the spell of his melodies found themselves reaching for memories, for dances long past, for whispers between young couples who had not yet learned the cost of growing older. His passing was more than a loss. It was the end of a chapter in Jamaica's romantic musical storytelling. 3 months earlier, on March 11th, another voice had slipped away. Colvin Coco T. Scott, gone at 65 after battling lymphoma and pneumonia. Coco T had the unique ability to soothe and uplift simultaneously, singing truth without bitterness, hope without naivety. In times of chaos, he sang peace. In times of despair, he sang encouragement. His songs were bridges for the youth, gentle reminders that righteousness could still be chosen in a world full of traps. When he left, the ghetto felt the absence in a profound way, as though one of its guardians had stepped quietly into the realm of ancestors. Not long after, on May 15th, Junior Biles passed at 77, ending a life shaped by genius in equal measure. There was always something haunting in his voice, as though he sang from the edge of a dream others could not access. His brilliance was unquestioned, but so were the shadows that often followed him. Shadows he confronted in melodies that still sound raw, vulnerable, and painfully honest. His death felt less like the extinguishing of a flame and more like the closing of a portal, one that allowed the world rare access to the fragile, luminous mind of a man touched by both sorrow and transcendence. Then came the news of determined Rohan Bennett, whose voice had once carried defiance like a weapon. He died on February 13th, at 52, after a fierce fight with cancer. Determined had never been a man of half measures. His lyrics were sharp, his energy fiery, his convictions unyielding. His voice sounded like survival itself, scraped from the edges of struggle and shaped into an anthem for youths who refused to bow to circumstance. When he passed, the battlefield of life felt quieter, deprived of one of its fiercest singers, one who had fought both external enemies and internal storms. And finally, woven somewhere between all these losses, came the quiet ache that hummed through reggae circles when people realized the magnitude of what had been taken from them in a single year. It was not merely 12 individuals, it was 12 guardian spirits, each one carrying a corner of the culture on their shoulders. Max Romeo's fire, Danny English's joy, Owen Gray's pioneering soul, Cali Bud's craftsmanship, Vivian Jones's tenderness, Joe Lickshot's thunder, Barry G's authority, Skill Cole's strategic brilliance, Leroy Gibbons's romance, Coco T's healing, Junior Biles's fragile genius, Determined's warrior spirit, 12 flames, each burning with its own color, intensity, rhythm. Their deaths were not random events scattered across a calendar. They felt connected, as though 2025 had opened a passage for elders and warriors to cross together, forming a procession of musical ancestors stepping into Zion shoulder to shoulder. And the people left behind could not help asking why. Why so many? Why so quickly? Why a year that felt like a storm tearing through the very foundation of Jamaican music? But perhaps the answer is not rooted in tragedy alone. Perhaps these 12 carried their torches as far as they could, leaving them now for the next generation to grasp. For every departure is also a summoning, a call for young artists to rise, for producers to innovate, for storytellers to honor what came before without merely repeating it. Legacies do not vanish. They transform. They echo through the laughter in the dance hall, the reasoning beneath the ackee tree, the hymns rising from the yard, the drums beating somewhere in the hills at midnight. And so the narration ends not with despair, but with a realization. As long as music continues to rise from Jamaica's soil, as long as children learn lyrics before they learn arithmetic, as long as one young singer decides to step into a studio and record their first trembling verse, these legends are not gone. They have simply stepped into another realm, leaving their voices lingering like ancestral winds. Now you see the true scale of the loss. Which legend's absence will change the sound of reggae the most? Share your tribute and who you think will carry their legacy in the comments below. Follow for more urgent reports on the real stories behind the headlines.